Hello, this is Ashutosh Varshney. I'm speaking to you from my Brown University office in Rhode Island, United States. And I'd like to speak to you about my latest column for ThePrint, published yesterday. And the topic is how to understand the transformations that President Donald Trump is bringing about in the United States, how to understand what's happening to the polity and what's happening to society. The relative consensus among scholars of democracy is that United States under Trump is undergoing a process of what has come to be called democratic backsliding, or alternatively, democratic erosion. The American politics, of course, is not alone. In the literature on democracy, India under Modi, Turkey under Erdogan, and Hungary under Orban are among the widely noted, widely acknowledged cases of democratic backsliding that predate, that precede the current American experience. So the question that I posed in my column is this: is democracy, US democracy under Trump, simply backsliding, or is the phenomenon qualitatively different? Is the United States, by any chance, going through the early phase of a right-wing revolution? So this answering this question first requires an understanding of what democratic backsliding means according to scholars of democracy. And the best book on the subject, or the most widely read book on the subject, is by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, and the book is How Democracies Die. And here is a summary of what they say, and a summary of what a lot of almost all other scholars of democratic backsliding say. Backsliding is a slow but cumulative process, an accumulation of small cuts, each delivering a partial blow to democracy, but collectively resulting in decisive democratic erosion. And there comes a point at which, if you will, water becomes steam and democracy dies. Moreover, while some democratic cuts are in the form of executive decrees, the executive simply announces this is what it's trying to do, or this is what it wants to do, and the prime minister or the president signs the decree, turning it into, or giving it a legal status. But many such cuts are approved by the legislature or judiciary, and therefore these cuts are wrapped in legality or procedural correctness. Institutions that are supposed to function independently, not in a partisan manner, and are meant to restrain executive excesses, such as the judiciary, such as the intelligence apparatus, such as the central bank, which in India would be called Reserve Bank, such as the Election Commission. These presumably, or sometimes constitutionally independent institutions who check executive excesses or legislative excesses, they end up enabling executive power instead of constraining it. The justification for such acts given by the executive and approved by the judiciary or independent institutions is often framed in terms of removing grave threats to national security or to public order, checking rampant corruption, or correcting supposed electoral irregularities. Those are repeatedly the grounds on which democratic backsliding or such decrees curtailing democracy have been issued in different parts of the world. Such moves do not come, this is important, such moves do not come in one fell swoop, in one quick addition or a few quick additions. Indeed, if you think about India, the first term of Modi's government did not begin with such acts. It was only by the second term that government began introducing major ideological changes. For example, the abrogation of Article 370, the legislation that revised the citizenship laws. Those are examples. Other things have also been done. Democratic erosion in Orban's Hungary or Erdogan's Turkey have also taken years to consolidate, and none of this happened in one fell swoop. What about Trump's America? In Trump's case, a great deal has happened within just 9 months, which took years and years elsewhere. The Department of Justice, DOJ, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, which for decades have functioned independently, have now openly declared that they are partisan arms of the executive and are tasked with bringing about a new order consistent with MAGA movement, Make America Great Again movement. Moreover, there is a document called Project 25, which also outlines the right-wing manifesto for Trump's second term. Government offices dealing with development, foreign aid, disaster relief, welfare in general, healthcare have been significantly reduced in size, while agencies associated with law enforcement have been substantially strengthened. Several immigration issues in particular have been redefined as national security threats. And to deal with them, the budget of ICE, US Immigration and Customs Enforcement is the full term for ICE, that agency, whose agents can now be found all across America. Its budget has been tripled. It's gone up 3 times, which allows then ICE agents to be virtually everywhere in America, certainly in urban America. Trump has also ordered the armed forces into Democrat-run cities, and most cities in America, bigger cities in America, are run by Democrats, Democratic Party. And he's argued that the main job of the armed forces is to fight, quote, enemy from within. And that the main training of the armed forces should, from now onwards, will take place on the streets of America. On his social media site, President Trump has openly asked the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to prosecute internal enemies, and some former law enforcement officers have already been prosecuted, though not yet convicted, and convictions may not take place, but prosecutions have taken place, and it is widely expected the Democratic politicians will be next. The astonishing speed, and this is a very important point, the astonishing speed with which the role of the government, the rule of law, and the functions of the military are being restructured suggests what? Suggests the beginning of a revolutionary rupture. Revolutions are generally understood as sudden and fundamental transformations of the political power structure and government institutions. The notion of an enemy from within is also typically associated with revolutionary political thrusts, though, of course, it has been used in non revolutionary situations also. But the idea that enemies from within should be rounded up, prosecuted, and perhaps jailed is more associated with revolutionary politics than democratic politics. In democratic politics, opponents, political opponents, are adversaries, not enemies. But revolutions do not stop at government structures alone. They seek what scholars call hegemony, meaning extending control to every realm of society, culture, education, media, and even the family. This was as true of communist revolutions of the last century, the Soviet Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, as it was of the religious revolution in Iran in 1979, which could be called a right wing revolution. And of course, the Chinese and the Soviet revolutions were left wing revolutions, communist revolutions. Trump has sought to bring America's universities, television networks, newspapers, law firms, NGOs, and philanthropic foundations under his administration's control, demanding subservience reinforced by threats. This drive for such extensive control in non-governmental sphere as well is consistent with the idea of a revolutionary project. But in the last section of my column, I argue that this attempted revolution faces formidable structural constraints and limits and is likely to falter. And three such constraints, three such limits can be quickly noted, but you can expand the number, but three very important limits can be quickly outlined and discussed. First, federalism is a major obstacle and remains one. Roughly 36.5% of the US population lives in states where both the executive and the two houses of the legislature are controlled by the Democratic Party. Now, it's true that the federal government is more powerful than state governments, but state governments continue to wield considerable authority over law enforcement, over education, over civil society, and they have their own spheres of activity which are constitutionally protected. Remember that America is called United States, states united to form America as a nation, and states have they're very strongly rooted in the Constitution, and their powers are protected. Second, though the US Supreme Court is generally viewed as supportive of Trump's project, the entire judicial system, the entire judiciary, cannot be expected to succumb. Many judges, as we've already seen, are fighting executive overreach with great determination. Many judges at the middle levels of the judiciary. Finally, America is far too diverse and far too committed to the idea of free speech, which is protected by the first constitutional amendment, much more so than anywhere else in the world. So it's far too diverse and far too committed to free speech to allow revolutionary capture and political and ideological uniformity all over the country. So my argument in the end, my conclusion in the column is that America under Trump is going through a kind of politics that is more than democratic backsliding. It's not slow cuts, slow and small cuts. It's in what might be called in one fell swoop. Within 9 months, a great deal has been done. So it's more than a case of democratic backsliding, but less than a revolution. That's all for now. I'll see you in 2 weeks when I publish my next column.